Yeah. All right. I'm going to start the episode. Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to Bro History. This is Henry and Danny. And today we're going to be talking about, I guess, a couple different subjects. Mainly, I think we're going to be covering the interesting crowded field running for president on the Democrat side. So it should be an interesting conversation. Danny, are you here, my friend?
I'm with you.
Danny is here, everyone. Danny is here. And Danny's a Democrat, so it should make for some
Danny is an
interesting
independent.
content.
Danny registered as a Democrat once to
Danny
run
is a
for
Democrat.
office.
He's a liberal pussy Democrat. He's a liberal socialist Democrat.
If I'm a Democrat, you're a Republican, so there.
I guess that's fair enough. I'm not registered as a Republican, by the way. So
I am registered as a Democrat.
You
for
tote
reasons.
the party line a lot more than I do.
Yeah, maybe. Well, we'll see come this cycle, right?
Yeah. Well, first thing I want to do is I want to say like and subscribe to the podcast on whatever app that you're listening or watching on. So if you're on YouTube, I'm going to do that YouTube subscribe animation again right now, like I did last episode. So that should have popped up if I don't forget. And like and subscribe or whatever interaction you can make with the podcast on whatever app you're doing, do it. There's some really nice reviews the other day, which was really kind.
Yeah, we appreciate those.
Yeah, we really appreciate them. And honestly, every single time somebody writes a review on the podcast on iTunes, I'm thrilled. Like, we're both thrilled whenever there's a good review. So
love reading them.
Really appreciate it. Even if it's a bad one, I'm still thrilled to see a review and see somebody interact with the podcast, despite it even being bad. Obviously, we prefer if they're good reviews. However, feel free to comment how you wish on the podcast. We want to actually improve as well. Like we say all the time, I hope we've come a long way since we started doing this a couple of months ago. And we have re-listened to some earlier episodes, and they're pretty shitty compared to the new ones. I don't know. I think we can both kind of agree.
Yeah,
on
I'd agree with that.
The quality has improved at the very least.
We might need to redo a couple of those episodes.
We might need to take some of the earlier episodes off because I don't want the first couple episodes to be like the intro to the show. I don't want people to think that like, oh, these guys are total amateurs.
Which we are.
Yeah, which we still are amateurs. However, like we got better stuff to do podcasting on. Like we just have better equipment, so the audio sounds better.
Better equipment, better topics, better guests, better everything. Everything is better.
Everything is better now, and also we're smarter just because we're covering the stuff a lot more, and it's a little bit more ingrained in our head, and better chemistry as well.
That's right.
Danny and I met in a. I guess you're wondering where Danny and I met, but Danny and I met in a Greco-Roman wrestler gym, and we started massaging each other.
Yeah, it was after a really good wrestle. Yeah,
after sparring, we would massage each other
with hot oils.
So that's how we met.
Yep.
But today, let's get into the topic. We're gonna turn people off who are listening for the first time. So today we're gonna be talking about, I guess, a number of different topics. Mainly, I think we're gonna be focusing on the Democrats running for president right now. Danny's a Democrat. He's a bleeding heart liberal, leftist, socialist pussy. I'm joking, Danny. He's kind of a, I guess, independent, right?
Yeah, I'm a registered Democrat for a utility. I ran for public office a few years ago, and I ran on the Democratic ticket, but I'd like to consider myself an independent because for a lot of things I don't fall on the party line for the Democrats. But yeah, you can call me a bleeding heart liberal. Sure, why not?
But most likely, you're going to vote Democrat this upcoming election, I imagine, right?
Unless an independent rolls around that makes more sense, but probably.
I have a feeling you are. Not trying to patronize
that's
you or anything like that, but
no,
I have
that's
a feeling
fine.
that you'll probably vote for the Democrat running, which is fine. There's actually a candidate who I'm interested in on that side.
And who's that?
And we'll go into it. But I want to talk about just like the crowded field. Because usually, historically, it's the Republicans that have a very crowded field. The last two cycles for Republicans, I mean, last cycle alone was it 8 people running, 10 people.
I think it was 16 when it started, dude. It was pretty big.
16. It was really big when it started, but it kind of dwindled down to like the main candidates that everyone was kind of considering. It really boiled down to before Trump started to run away with everything.
Mm-hmm.
It was Trump, Cruz, Rubio, Bush, Rand Paul, Ben Carson, and am I
Ben
missing
Carson.
anyone?
You're probably missing like 10 others, but those were the big ones.
those were the big ones that were in the final debates. Not the final debates, but that were in the bigger debates.
Yeah, they got talk time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they got talk time. Well, Ben Carson didn't get any talk time.
Well, he got nap time. Ben Carson got nap time.
It's probably a good thing.
Yeah. I'm Ben Carson. I'm a neurosurgeon.
Have you ever seen that picture of
Which
Ben
picture?
Carson with Jesus?
With Jesus? No.
I'm going to show it right now in the show because it's so hilarious. But it is, he had a portrait hung up in his house,
mm-hmm.
and it's in his hospital. I think it's
in his hospital.
Yeah.
So other people see this, not just him.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
It's of him and Jesus. It's bizarre. It's so weird. It's hilarious though.
That's hilarious.
It's really, really weird. And he also has a huge afro. It's like a younger Ben Carson, so,
so he's
a
like
huge afro.
Did he have a pick in his hair?
No, he didn't have a pick in his hair, but it looked bizarre, and it was also hilarious. But we're not here to talk about the Republicans. We're here to talk about the Democrats. Now,
Demopocalypse 2020.
Off the bat, are there any candidates that you find interesting?
Yes, but he hasn't just committed to running yet. And
Who's
that's good old boy Beto O'Rourke.
Beto?
Yeah, I'm running for him. If he's in, he wins. That's my prediction.
Really?
Yep, that's right.
I don't think so.
I think he's young, he's handsome, he's well-spoken, he's from Texas, he speaks Spanish, he's got really reasonable, sensible policy, and, he's not without some faults, but he owns up to his mistakes like a champion, and he keeps the conversation running, and he knows how to hit back. So I think he's got enough star power to run against Trump and win against Trump. There's a lot of reasons why I like Beto.
I don't think he has a chance. He couldn't beat Ted Cruz.
I mean,
in a Senate race.
Honestly doesn't make a difference. Not in my opinion, at least. Texas is a strong red state, and there are a lot of other states in the union, a lot of really big states with a lot of voting power, and he was extremely, extremely famous for that short period of time when he was running against Ted Cruz. And I might remind you that he didn't lose by very much. So he very nearly flipped a red seat in one of the reddest states in the country. That is no small feat. Don't sleep on Beto.
I kind of disagree with that. I think Texas is becoming more and more of a swing state every single year.
Well, I agree.
I think it's just the demographic changes.
Beto is a big reason for that. Beto really energized the blue base in Texas.
I don't think it was Beto energizing the blue base. I think it was Beto. The close election was a consequence of Texas becoming a swing change due to demographics, rather than Beto getting the people in the middle more enthusiastic about voting for a Democrat. You know what I mean?
I think the reason why he got so many votes is because he interested a lot of people in the middle, a lot of people that were unsullied on Ted Cruz, people who didn't really like him. I even think he picked up a couple red seats, a couple red votes, I might add. But we can agree to disagree on that point, what the impact of Beto's election was in Texas. But there's no mistaking the fact that this man had star power everywhere else. Nobody was as electrifying. All right. What other than Bernie Sanders, what one Democrat in the field do you believe has enough star power to take on Trump in a one-on-one on live TV? Who do you think?
Enough star power to take on Trump. Well, I'll get to that, but I want to go through the field. There is one person I'm interested in.
And who's that?
I'll save it. I'll tell you right now. It's Tulsi Gabbard.
Tulsi Gabbard. Okay.
I think that she's the best candidate in the field by far, and we'll get into that. Obviously, you probably know why I think that she's the best candidate.
Actually, no. I'm curious, but we'll get to that. I don't
let's
know.
get to that. I want to talk about some of the other candidates in the field first.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm not going to talk about all of them because there's a lot, and I don't really feel like I'm not going to talk about Kamala Harris.
But why? Why not?
Harris.
She's pretty important in the field right now.
I don't think that she's really going to stand it. I don't really know that much about her policy. First of all,
fair enough.
I know her as more of just kind of like a mainstream Democrat. She hasn't really said anything interesting, and I really pay attention to the foreign policy stuff. And I have zero clue of what her foreign policy is. I don't think she's ever commented on it. I don't think she's ever had a speech about foreign policy. So I haven't really followed her. I just kind of know her as as a corporate Democrat.
I mean, quick on that. She's been on, the judiciary committees. So obviously you're not going to hear a whole lot from her before she decided to run on foreign policy, because that just wasn't in her wheelhouse to be speaking about. Obviously she would vote, but really where she was making a big difference was in that judiciary committee. And the highlights for Kamala Harris, and we can move off of her if you don't want to talk about her, but she's basically a Democrat that's focusing on middle class relief, and of course that comes along with taxing the rich, which is kind of a hot button topic this election cycle for the Dems. So that's probably where you're going to see she's like biting off of Bernie a little bit in that respect. But she's been working with the likes of, folks like Elizabeth Warren and AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. All of them have laid out plans to basically hike taxes on folks that make millions and millions. I think Kamala Harris is like 50 million or more, as opposed to like Ocasio-Cortez that's looking for anything above 10 million. But that's really the big one. It's going to be a big issue during the campaign cycle. And she's gone in for it. She's also been really, really kind of outspoken during all of these hearings for confirmation hearings of Trump's picks. So she doesn't throw softballs in those ones. So you can see her scoring some points, at least on the blue side, for that. So I wouldn't sleep on Kamala Harris. She can talk. She's smart. She's fierce, and she's also got the woman of color. So that's identity politics or not, like that's going to play a part whether you like it or not. So don't sleep on Kamala Harris. That's all I got to say.
Well, I think the most qualified person running would be the first on a lot of things.
Yeah, so I agree. Tulsi Gabbard. We'll get to her.
We'll get to her in a little bit, but yeah, I really don't know that much about her. I just kind of know her as a critic of the Trump administration. That's really all I know her as. I've never really looked into her policy at all. I know I've talked to progressives, like really progressives, like Bernie supporting progressives. Who dabble with like socialism, and they don't like her. They think she's too much of a corporate Democrat, like Hillary Clinton.
I mean, I agree with that. But that's not to say that we should sleep on her either. I don't love her as a candidate, but she checks a whole lot of boxes for the Democratic base. So that's why I'm just pointing out, don't sleep on her.
Well, the next person in the field, Kirsten Gillibrand. Gillibrand. I should know that because I'm a New Yorker. Kirsten Gillibrand.
Yeah, she's something.
She is terrible. She stands no chance. I do not expect her going very far at all. She basically comes off like Hillary Clinton 2.0. She was recently bragging about her calling up different banks and different donors at Wall Street. She will not be a popular. She will not be a popular candidate with the progressive base at all.
Nope.
Maybe like mainstream.
Mainstream, sure.
Mainstream Democrats, maybe, but I don't think a mainstream Democrat will really stand a chance against Trump. I think a lot of people are very sour with mainstream Democrats.
No,
I think, but it's not just people on the right. I think a lot of people who are really on the left are very, very sour with mainstream Democrats, and she's just too much of a corporatist. If you peel back her, and I'm speaking in terms of how I kind of see progressives, or how progressives have been looking at the field. Is not based off what I've seen, but I just noticed this is what progressives are saying, that they are very fed up with the Democrats who cater to the Wall Street.
Sure.
And Kirsten Gillibrand definitely seems like that. She tries to run on being a very big leftist, but I don't think it's true. You can just see by her reaching out to Wall Street, which is going to I think it's going to cancel her out.
Yeah. No,
in the primary.
Absolutely. And a big part of that is going to be because she's got her own set of, like, you know, liberal no-nos as well. She was like big gun supporter, you know, and at least for the blue field, that's not like a very good platform to run on. I think you're absolutely right. She's got this kind of Hillary 2.0 vibe to her. She's not fun, which is kind of a dumb measure for presidents. But if we're being real, our presidential elections are turning into reality TV shows that I unapologetically like to watch. She's just not gonna. It's not gonna fly. She's not a progressive, you know. She just isn't. And I think her strongest issue is just, you know, playing identity politics as being a woman, and also just being an anti-Trumper. And that's par for the course. That's not going to set you apart from the rest of the candidates. Like, pretty much everyone who runs on the Democratic side is running de facto against Trump, as well as each other. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's fair. To give Kirsten Gillibrand a little bit of, I guess, just to defend her a little bit. I mean, I actually agreed with her previous opinion. So, but I'm defending her to progressives. When she supported the Second Amendment, or was a lot more vocal about supporting the Second Amendment, she was a congresswoman in upstate New York.
Yeah, it was a very conservative area of New York as well.
Yeah, for people who don't know, New York, if you split the city and an upstate apart, they're very different from each other.
Yep.
Upstate New York is a lot more conservative than the New York City metro area. That's where she originally came from. So she obviously had to have a pro-gun stance if she wanted to get elected up there.
That's right.
Because, well, you know, a lot of people have guns up there. It's upstate New York. They don't have the same type of gun control laws that we have in Manhattan or even the rest of the city. So, I mean, if I was on the left, if I was a leftist, I wouldn't hold that against her. She's really bad on foreign policy. I've looked at it. She supported military intervention in Libya. She supported funding for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I believe she did not support funding Syrian rebels or funding Syrian opposition, which is good, in my opinion.
Moving in the right direction for anti-war, right?
However, her support for the intervention in Libya almost disqualifies someone for me, would disqualify me. And if you're a leftist anti-war person, and I'm sure a couple of you are listening, if you're a leftist anti-war person, that's not going to be the candidate that you want. She has been all up on military regime change. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I'm in agreement with that assertion.
So Elizabeth Warren.
Oh, that's a fun one.
Now, I said, this is my initial thought, that Elizabeth Warren would be the person who would win the primary.
What?
I thought that she would win for
2020 or for before?
For 2020.
Okay.
For 2020. I believe that she would win the primary.
And then
she embarrassed herself with that stupid DNA test.
Yeah, that was dumb.
It's not a big deal, obviously.
Yeah.
Politicians, they over-exaggerate and they make stuff up all the time. But it's really, really embarrassing because she always talks about Native American rights and Native American issues. She put that on her, I think her job application at Harvard. I don't know if it was when she went to school or I think it was to get a job at Harvard as an economics professor. She put that on because she wanted the affirmative action that came with it to get a job at Harvard, which, I mean, I'm not going to shit on someone for that completely because I know people who are like blatantly white, which is super, super white, and they happen to have a last name like Lopez, but they have like red hair and blue eyes, and they
maybe
don't
using
put
that to their
Hispanic on their
advantage.
college.
Right.
They put Hispanic on their college applications, which, you know what? If it makes it easier,
Go for
I
it.
get it. Her DNA test, and for guys who don't know, she was saying that she was Cherokee, and then it came out. I mean, she doesn't look like she's Native American at all, and I guess her proof was based off the pure speculation, because she had like high cheekbones. That was a term
No,
that she
so
used.
I think you're
She had
you're stretching this just a little bit. I think she definitely mentioned the cheekbones thing. Where she was originally saying it, and this is as far as I understood from what I've read, is that there was a family myth that there was Native American in her family. And this is honestly, like, I'm sure thousands, maybe millions of people have a family mythos about their origins that only until, consumer DNA tests, couldn't have been proven or disproven. So it was a lot less damaging than you would think. It's just she was spewing the same thing that she was told and using a little bit of confirmation bias, I guess you would say, vis-a-vis her cheekbones, to back up that claim. And then eventually, the gaffe there was that she released the results of her DNA test, and it turns out she's like 1054th or some shit like that, Native American, which is nominal at best.
Yeah, it's embarrassing because she used it to get her job, and the percentage of Native American. My mom is 2% Middle Eastern. That's the DNA. The DNA test came back, and she was 2% Middle Eastern.
That makes you 1%.
My mom is 5'10". She has blonde hair and blue eyes and can't go out in the sun because she has light skin. She looks completely Nordic, Irish, English. Like she doesn't look like she has anything that's not European or Northern European, to be more specific, in her blood. And she had Middle Eastern blood. So I can go around and start saying, "Hey, listen, I'm Arabic. My Arab brothers." Imagine if I did that. I took a DNA test just to confirm, and I got 0 Middle Eastern blood in me.
Oh, so it washed out with your dad?
Yeah, washed out. So I didn't get that. I'm all Irish and Polish.
Nice.
I'm like, yeah, it's very strange.
I did a DNA test, and 23andMe sent it back to me and said, "We have no idea what you are. Try again."
The Arab and the Latino, they
were like, "This
cancel
is
each other
yeah."
out.
They were like, "This is impossible. Do this again. You did something wrong."
You are from 2 different parts of the world. There's no way that you guys
could have ever met. Yeah, New Jersey's not a thing, Anyway, so back to Warren. Things I like about Warren. I loved that she was big after the financial meltdown in 2008, with trying to make these big banks accountable, holding them accountable for their bullshit. And she's put up a lot of really awesome legislation that has been very, very helpful for all Americans, left, right, and center, in terms of big banks doing people dirty and doing things like subprime lending and shit like that, and making sure that interest rates stay reasonable and not a vulture. Like, I really like that she goes to bat for the American people on a lot of different economic things, and I think that's a really strong and positive point for Elizabeth Warren. I think that this DNA bullshit is quite literally bullshit. I think that if we're using our current president as like a barometer for like how much bullshit can the United States, voter, the average voter take. I think that's a super, super high bar. So this DNA thing, we're going to forget about it. If it wasn't because we brought it up, I'm sure people probably wouldn't have been thinking about it. Like that's going to blow over. If Trump can say grab her by the pussy and still be elected president, I doubt this DNA test is going to make a fucking difference.
The difference is, though, is that Trump's base likes that rhetoric.
So maybe she'll scoop up some of Trump's base. I don't know what to tell you, man.
No, but her rhetoric is not. So I'm not going to speak for all Trump supporters, but they understand that's part of the branding of Trump, his harsh rhetoric.
So maybe she should adopt this as a part of her brand. Like, oops, I thought I was Native American. Psych.
But his branding is that he's an asshole. And people like that about him, and it's just something an asshole would say. So people are like, all right, whatever. He's an asshole. I understand that he's an asshole. That just comes off really weird. It comes off more weird than dishonest.
You know what came off weird for Elizabeth Warren? She was doing an Instagram live thing, and like midway through a sentence, she was like, "And I'm gonna go grab a beer," like trying to act like the person that she's like. Yeah, I gotta send this to you, dude. It's funny as hell. And then she awkwardly goes over, grabs a beer, asks her husband if he wants them, and he's like, "No, I'm good." Like almost as if to say, like, "Why are you drinking a beer? Like you don't drink." That was awkward. I don't like that she's trying to be cool. Like, just keep being who you're being, like fight for the right shit for the American people, run on that. And if the people want it, great. If not, stop trying to be something you're not. And I think that's like an overarching theme for Elizabeth Warren. Stop trying to be something that you're not.
Yeah. I've talked to a lot of progressives who are jaded as well with her. I don't know her full background as far as like what she's been doing with like, I guess, different corporations or different financial firms or who her donors are. But
she doesn't have donors. She's like a Bernie. She's like a Bernie. She wants money out of politics just as much as Bernie does. I recommend that you look into her. She's interesting. She's got a lot of very, very smart economics shit. But I know that you're big into foreign policy, and this might not be like the most interesting point for you. But
foreign, I can tell you right now that me and her, I couldn't be more diametrically opposed with her economic policies. I'm a lot more libertarian, but for the purposes of this podcast, I try to focus a little bit more on foreign policy because I don't want to bore people on my economic thoughts.
Sure.
But with her foreign policy, I'll split it. I'll split even with her. So I think that she overall is pretty non-interventionist. She is for troops being pulled out of Syria. She's for troops being pulled out of Afghanistan. So she's for pulling us out of the major conflicts that we're in right now, which is great. On the other side, she's very, very, very pro-Israel, which makes me believe that she is very in bed with the Israeli lobby. And it also makes me think that she can be manipulated and used by other lobbies.
I mean, that's a fair point. But, that's
the Israeli
lobby is the largest lobby. So,
here's the thing,
they'll
though.
Get anybody.
Every single politician is very, very influenced by the Israeli lobby.
Right.
So it's like we're pulling hairs right now.
Right.
They're like, no, like what American politician is not influenced?
Just a little bit of wishful thinking for you. You're kind of hoping for somebody that isn't.
I mean, I'm not looking for somebody who's anti-Israel. I'm looking for someone who's just not completely influenced by their lobby. That's it.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
I'm not anti-Israel at all.
Yeah.
By the way, for people listening, I think that the Israeli lobby, at the end of the day, causes more harm for Israel than good.
I'd agree with that.
I think a lot of what they do is that it is counterintuitive, and it causes a lot of ill sentiment towards Israel. A lot of things like AIPAC does. I don't think that Israelis are bad or Israel is bad. I think that Israel has a right to exist.
Same.
I am very critical of some of the things that their government does. In no way am I in support of any type of violence or anything like that, or anti-Semitism, because anti-Semitism, I think, is retarded, and I don't really tolerate it. But on the flip side, I think that organizations in Israel like the AIPAC lobby and all that stuff, they're not they're not necessarily good influences on the United States.
I'm just kind of against lobbying in general. I don't think that foreign powers should have anything or any say over how we vote for our government and how we run our government. If there was some other giant, if there was a UK lobby that was as big as AIPAC, for example, I would be opposed to that too. It's just stay out of our government, you know. It's
just a matter of it's any lobby, and it's any country that I mean, I don't want to go too far into Zionism and stuff like that, but if any country had a biggest footprint as Israel does
on the lobbying side,
our
right?
legislation with our politicians,
right,
then it would be a problem. It doesn't matter what country it is. It
right.
just matters that
exactly.
the country does have that big of a footprint.
Mm-hmm.
But not to get too off topic. So I think she's okay on foreign policy. I'm not going to bash her too hard in that. I think it's unfair to really go hard on her. But now this leads me to somebody who I actually find very interesting, who's running for president.
Pete Buttigieg.
Who?
Pete Buttigieg, the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, 37 years old.
Pete Buttigieg. He announced. Buttigieg?
I don't know.
D's nuts. No, I think the lady, the woman that I find most interesting who's running for president right now is Tulsi Gabbard. She's a very interesting person. She is a congresswoman out of Hawaii from the 2nd Congressional District.
Army National Guard veteran.
She served in Iraq. So she's a veteran.
In the National Guard, right?
Major in the National Guard. She is. She has some very, very unique foreign policy perspectives, and I just find her a very, very interesting candidate. And I think with her just being in the election field will cause a lot of good conversation to go on. I'm curious what your thoughts are on Tulsi Gabbard before I get into it with her.
I agree. There's a bunch of things. Pro and con that run through my head when I think of Tulsi Gabbard. I can run through pros. Obviously, the fact that she is, like a veteran and has served time, really gives me the feeling that she would be very strong on foreign policy, but not unreasonable as well. She's seen what war is and its consequences. I think she'd be a lot more measured in her deployment of forces. So I really like that background. It's not something that should be exclusive, for a president to have, but it's definitely a bonus, really, obviously behind the idea of having a woman for president. I think she's a smart woman. I don't think we've ever seen anyone in the highest, office of the land from Hawaii, so that's really awesome. If we're playing identity politics here, she's also, she's Hindi, right? So that's, an interesting kind of angle that she can go for there. And obviously she supported my man Bernie Sanders back in the 2016 primaries, so I'd have to imagine that her policy, at least domestically, is pretty similar, or at least sympathetic to the Bernie cause. Some negatives, I know that she's caught a little bit of flack for meeting with Bashar al-Assad, the Syrian president. There's some things that we can unpack there. And I think the big one now is, the fact that she had in her past some pretty strongly anti-gay sentiments and has done some work for anti-gay advocacy groups. And that's, almost like a non-start for progressives, I think. She's since apologized and, has said that she's, evolved much like President Obama had. I'm wondering how that'll play out. Also, I forgot to point out, she's pretty young. She's 37, not that much older than us. And that would probably make her one of the youngest presidents ever, if not the youngest president. How old was JFK? I think he was the youngest before that, right? How old was he?
JFK, I think, was 38.
Yeah. So
or 39.
Yeah. So she would be either 1 or 2, depending on like when her birthday falls and when she gets elected, if she gets elected.
Well, let's go into our history. So She was, all right, she's a veteran.
Mm-hmm.
She was stationed she did her first deployment at the LCA Anaconda base, which is a big airfield. It's a big air base. I think it's about in northwest of Baghdad.
Mm-hmm.
What her job was in her first deployment was that she did casualty collection work.
Jesus.
That's a very, very tough job.
Yeah.
Basically, she did a lot of, she was keeping track of the casualties of probably a lot of her good friends. It probably was a very, very surreal type of job to have.
Mm-hmm.
She has won multiple awards. She won a combat medic badge, which I actually kind of find strange because I don't think she was a medic, which I'm kind of I'm a bit confused about.
Maybe she did CPR on somebody and you earn it that way.
Maybe she did. She won the MSM award. Something I do kind of find weird with her is that on her R&R time, she went to London to give condolences for the London bombing while she was 21 years old. That's kind of weird.
It's interesting.
It's kind of like she was being groomed a little bit for politics, to be completely honest.
It's interesting.
At a very young age. Because she was in politics before she resigned from her, I think she was a state representative or something. I'm not sure exactly what seat that she had, but she was in politics as a very young lady. And I think she was forced to resign once she was in the military. But a lot of her actions make you believe that she is always thinking about the next step. And I'm going over actually kind of the negative parts of her, but I'm going to get into the things that I find that are pros. She has been connected with supporting torture, which is not good, or at least justifying it at the very least.
Right.
Now, the reason why I think that she is a good candidate is because, first of all, she did show that she had principled by sticking up to Bernie Sanders, sticking up for Bernie Sanders.
That's right.
Though I'm not a Bernie Sanders supporter, I think it was good politically to stand up for him and stand up to the mainstream Democrats who really did fuck him over.
Yeah, without a doubt.
In a huge way. Mm-hmm. So she resigned. I think she was vice chairman of the
Democratic Party.
DNC.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And she stepped down, which was I think will pay off politically for her. She probably will get slandered for it by a lot of the mainstream Democrats like Hillary Clinton, but that's to be expected. Now, here's where I really like her. She is great. I think she is fantastic on Syria. She gets it. She gets U.S. military intervention. In my opinion, she gets it. She understands that a lot of the interventions that we've been involved in, have caused a lot of harm. And she was very, very skeptical over the support of Syrian rebels, the so-called moderate Syrian rebels. She actually claimed that we were giving money to ISIS while we were in that whole situation when the CIA was funding these moderate rebels. So she has blatantly said that the U.S. is complicit in supporting radical jihadist groups, which I think is true. She met with Assad. So this is where she's getting a lot of her flack on. She met with Assad. Mm-hmm. She decided that she wasn't really buying the mainstream media narrative on the Syrian civil war. She didn't buy that Assad was a genocidal maniac. She didn't buy that all the violence was coming from the government and none of the violence was coming from the moderate rebels. I do moderate rebels every single time I do it because you can't moderately chop off somebody's head.
Just like a little chop, you know, just a little off the top, you know.
Moderate rebels. The moderate rebels that we were funding, they were found and they were in many organizations were complicit in murdering and butchering people. One of the moderate groups, moderate rebels. I mean, there's so many crimes. I don't even want to go over them all right now, but there were very, very brutal crimes from a lot of the rebel groups that we were funding and supporting. Also, a lot of these moderate rebel groups that we were supporting in the war in Syria defected to ISIS, defected to Al-Qaeda. They ended up just joining the other side. So I think she spotted that and she spotted the hypocrisy. And I think as somebody who is in the military and a veteran, She did not want to tolerate that, which I think is great on her. And she went to Assad. There's still that narrative, and I bet it's pretty mixed for people who are listening right now. I'm on the side that, yeah, the Assad government is not great. The Assad government is definitely not perfect. And yeah, the Assad family has been running that country for since the 70s. Assad's father took power, I think, in 1970 or 1969. When did the Ba'ath Party emerge in Syria?
You're asking the wrong person. I'm terrible with numbers.
I forget the exact date, but the Assad family's been in power for about 50 years. So they ran the country. They ran the country with an iron fist for the most part. The father was more of a dictator than Assad. You see, actually, Assad wasn't even supposed to take power. The other son, there was an older son who was being groomed for power. He was the one that was supposed to be president, who the older Assad was supposed to hand over the keys to. And he died, I think in a car accident or something. It was some type of freak accident that he died in. And Bashar al-Assad was a practicing eye doctor, optical surgeon.
That's right.
Or he was a practicing optical surgeon.
I'll give him credit. He's a very smart dude. Like I've seen
no intention of actually engaging in politics or joining politics. He was kind of forced into the situation, and he was given the entire Syrian government in his hands. He ruled the country from 2000 to 2011, and there was no violence at all. There was no violence. There's no history of violence. Yes, he was authoritarian. He was a dictator. He did have absolute power, and it was power gained through nepotism. However, there was no violence. There was no genocide. There was no ethnic cleansing. There was no brutal mistreatment of minorities. It was more so of a situation like Assad was an Alawite, and Alawites were a minority group. And basically the Alawites were kind of like on top of the caste system. And for guys who don't know, Alawites are kind of an offshoot of Shiite Muslims, but they're not really like a 12er Muslim will not consider an Alawite a Muslim. They're like Alawites celebrate Christmas. So they're very, very, I guess, Jesus oriented. Like Jesus is very important to them. They're very westernized. They believe, they wear Western style clothing. They drink, they smoke, they do all that stuff that we like to do over here in our country. And so it's very different type of government. It's a different sect of Islam than what you normally hear. And basically they formed a super majority with other minorities because they were a minority. The Alawites formed a kind of a coalition with Christians and Shiites in the country, just because the Syria is I think 70 to 80% Sunni, or 70% Sunni at the very least. So, but despite having kind of like this minority ran government, there was no violence. The majority of the Syrian army is Sunni, and there was no just extreme violence.
All right, so I'll counterpoint you on that one. When the Arab Spring happened, the result of actions that were taken by Assad and by Assad's government killed thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, lots and lots of people. So I think that's important for context. There might not have been violence leading up to it, but the way that he handled that situation was absolutely brutal and terrible for normal, everyday Syrians. I'm not talking about rebels, moderate rebels. I'm not talking about extremist, militants. I'm not talking about ISIS. I'm literally talking about regular people. And the way that he handled that situation caused the deaths and the almost forced migration of hundreds of thousands of people. So he's not a saint.
The forced migration was caused by the imported rebels that were going around different cities in Syria and chopping people's heads off. And murdering massive groups. like
I think
ISIS and al-Qaeda.
Bernie said it best. Syria is a quagmire inside of a quagmire. You're looking at it from the moderate rebel lens. There was also ISIS, and there was also the Syrian government. All three of those parties played a role in forced migration. That the blame isn't placed on any one of them; it's placed on all of them. Frankly, it is
The blame
fucked up.
In my opinion, the blame doesn't lie with Assad for. Yeah, like Assad indiscriminately killed people in bombing raids. That's absolutely true, and that's if you want to pinpoint one crime on Assad, then that would be it: bombing cities and killing civilians. However, it's the country was in a massive civil war.
It's not an excuse.
That's what war.
It's
war
not an
is
excuse.
war is fucking hell. War is fucking
Agreed,
hell.
but that's not an excuse.
And the war was brought into Syria. He didn't start the war. It was a war that was imported into that country.
Still not an. It's not.
Issue.
It's not an excuse in my opinion.
Dude, if there was a civil war in the United States, the Union killed hundreds of thousands of people.
Still not an excuse, you know, like
it's not an excuse, but civilians die when there's war.
Yeah, well,
and if there was a war in our own country, if there was a war in the U.S. right now, if there was a big civil war,
there's a big difference between
the
U.S. Civil
War.
War.
Blow the shit out of the fucking cities.
No,
I
don't think so. I honestly don't think so. Making a comparison with the U.S. Civil War and a civil war in Syria is like apples and oranges, man. The types of
all civil wars are hell.
They are.
That's what I'm trying to say.
They are, but
the
technology that they have available to them and the support that they had available to them was such that they did not need to indiscriminately bomb in order to make great strides in their civil war.
Dude,
it's just
the technology that we have right now
that they have and the support that they had. There was. The Russians have been propping them up for a very long time. The Russians have been supporting them throughout this entire civil war. They had and have the technology to be much more tactical about how they quell a civil war, and they had much better capability to fight off ISIS. And they should have been doing a coalition with people who have mutual interests in mind, i.e., Iran. So. I don't have it.
There was a coalition with Iran. They invited Iran into the country.
Right.
They invited Russia into the country because they all had a mutual interest in stopping radical Islamists from taking over Syria.
And that should have been the route that they pursued.
That was a route they pursued.
They also
the route they pursued was to destroy the radical Islamists. They also pursued
the idea of just indiscriminately bombing areas. Like that wasn't the correct move. And it killed lots of people, and it added to the forced migration in Syria without a doubt. Without a doubt.
They did kill a lot of people in indiscriminate bombing runs. Yeah, it's true. They barrel bomb cities, and it's very, very tragic. But the death of those civilians, there was a lot more civilian death in the hands of ISIS, in the hands of al-Qaeda, in the hands of these moderate rebels. Like it wasn't. It was a civil, bloody war. Assad used brutal tactics to put down the rebellion, and a lot of people died. It's a very unfortunate. I'm not saying Assad is a good guy. Assad's the government, so Assad his hands are not completely clean in it. But I'm just saying that the majority of the fault comes from the countries that imported the revolution in Syria in the first place.
All right, we're gonna have to agree to disagree on that one.
Chaos. The country. We can go into the Syrian civil war in the reasons for it and why it started. Maybe in a different episode where we can really just take.
Let's go back to Tulsi Gabbard though,
and go back. But I'll just say that my opinion is that her meeting with Assad was a good thing. It wasn't a bad thing. And I don't think that she's some Assad apologist who supports radical Arab dictators. That's her criticism, by the way. So I'll go into that. So she does have, her critics say that she's an Assad apologist. And she's also a big supporter of el-Sisi of Egypt, who's also a dictator. Who's also killed civilians. So that's where her criticism comes. She's very, very anti-radical Islam. So she's had multiple speeches. I think she had a speech in Israel. I think she had a speech in. I think she had. I saw her make not. She wasn't making a speech in Israel. She was making a speech. I think at like the Christian Zionist, some Christian Zionist group, and she was talking about the dangers of radical Islam. Probably just trying to, make a little good with the Israeli right wing, because she has been actually pretty critical of them. So here's something really that's very interesting, and another thing that people I was reading this article in Haaretz today, and this has been an ongoing thing. So people are saying that she supports Hindu nationalism.
I don't even know what that is.
She's not Indian, she's Hindu. So her mom grew up in India and she's a Hindu. Right. But she's Samoan and she's white. So she's
Hinduism
not
is her
Indian.
Religion.
Hinduism is her religion. That is correct. So naturally, she is close with Hindu groups, which makes sense, right? She has a good relationship with the prime minister of she has a good relationship with the prime minister of India.
Morsi, is it?
And yeah. And a lot of her donors are Hindu. I think she has over $1 million in donors in Hindu, which makes sense, right? Which makes sense. There's always going to be some degree of nepotism and donor nepotism, when you have one of your own who's running and you think it's going to fight or represent your interest, and you're naturally going to attract donors to that person. That person is naturally going to attract donors from that group.
Unless you're Bernie Sanders or Beto O'Rourke, because they have
it's not
no big donors. But go ahead.
It's not that surprising.
Yeah, no, it's not
that this happened. So they've been actually critical of that, saying that some people have said that she's a religious extremist, which I don't think is true. People have been saying that she grew up in a conservative household. She actually grew up in a conservative Catholic household, which is kind of weird because everyone represents her as a Hindu, but she didn't become a Hindu until she was, I think, a teenager. What was I going to say? So the Prime Minister of India, Modi. So Modi is somebody who is considered to have dirt on his hands, or blood on his hands would be a better way to describe it. So in 2002,
excuse me,
there was a big riot in India called the Gujarat Riots. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that. I think it's the Gujarat Riots or Gujarat Riots. Does that sound right to you?
Sure.
So basically what happened was that a bunch of Hindus, so Indian Hindus, were traveling on a train, and the train was ambushed by, I believe it was a bunch of Muslim Pakistanis. And I think it was I forgot the exact amount of people who were killed. I think it was something about 15 people died in this train, these Hindus on a pilgrimage. And what happened was that, for people who don't know, there's a lot of animosity between the two sides in India, between Hindus and Muslims. India has a population of over 1 billion people. However, they have a population of over 300 million Muslims in that country as well. So I think it's the third or second biggest Muslim country in the world. I think Indonesia is number one, right? Indonesia's number one. So it has the third biggest Muslim population in the world. It might be number 2, actually.
It's one of the big ones.
Can you think of another one?
With that many people? No.
Pakistan has a population of like 200 million, I think, right?
We're going to have...
I'm just making a guess on that. I'm going to look that up real quick. Hold on while I go type on my computer. Whoa, spot on. 197. How did they know that?
You read something at some point.
I know population. I know. I bet you looked it up, Henry. Maybe I did. Maybe I just knew that when I was born.
Yeah, it's Indonesia, which is 12.7% of the world's Muslims, followed by Pakistan, which is 11%, and India, which is 10%. So number 3.
Number 3, I was right. So she is she's friends with this guy, and so during this riot, man, I completely lost my thought looking up that population. I shouldn't do that. Looking up the population of Pakistan just completely threw me off. All right, I'll get back to it. So I'll make a long story short. So basically, there was a huge riot. There was a huge riot in India, and thousands of Muslims were killed in this riot. Like, there was arson, there was murders, there was just this very violent riot that broke off. There was a lot of animosity.
It was like the Hindu Kristallnacht, basically.
Yeah, it was bad. And basically, people have always confused Mati as somebody who instigated the event.
Modi, or whatever.
Modi the musician, or this Modi. So people have always accused him of being an instigator. I forget what position he had, but he was chief minister. So I think chief minister in India at that time, I think, was probably some kind of, I think it was a police type position. But he was accused of supporting the violence and instigating it. So he has blood in his hand. This guy has been prime minister since 2014, though, and he's had a relationship with every single Western country in the world. So now that you're bringing up now to condemn him just because Tulsi Gabbard has a relationship with him. And naturally, it makes sense that she's going to have a relationship with this guy because she's a Hindu and he's a Hindu. And obviously, they're just naturally the Hindu population is naturally going to see her as an ambassador. Like, is that so fucking wild that they see her as an ambassador because she's the only elected official in the history of the United States who's Hindu? Right. Is that wild that she would be an ambassador?
No,
I don't know. Am I being a dick?
No, you're not. No, you're not.
Am I like whitewashing his war crimes?
Well, we don't want to overlook his war crimes, but I think that the assertion that,
or police crimes or whatever you want to call it. Alleged ones, I don't know. I honestly don't know that much about the Gujarat riot, so I can't tell you if he is complicit in instigating violence or not. However, this guy has been the prime minister of India since 2014, and there's many elected officials that have a relationship with him. So honestly, I really do feel like this is a smear tactic. Like, bringing the relationship and using that as a negative is actually a smear tactic against Tulsi Gabbard.
I mean, welcome to the fucking welcome to the field. That's not going to be that's going to be the least of her worries. I think they're going to, and by they I mean Democrats and Republicans. Literally everyone is going to smear everyone as hard as fucking possible until that primary.
Tulsi Gabbard is getting the blunt of the smears right now, though. She is getting smeared a lot. And what they're doing right now is that they're wrapping in all of her relationships with these various world leaders, dictators, presidents, whatever you want to call them. They're wrapping them all up into a package and saying that she supports authoritarian regimes in the Middle East, the greater Middle East, and India. She's an apologist for these bad regimes.
I mean, take that so let's take that with a grain of salt.
But let me take that one step further first before they're also wrapping that up with her being anti-Islam, because a lot of these
I see where you're going there. So
a lot of these dictators that she supports or she allegedly supports, whatever you want to call it, they're trying to frame the narrative that she supports dictators who have a very anti-radical or Islamic or Islamist stance. So they're trying to be like, oh, well, she's just supporting, or she's cool with Assad and al-Sisi and Modi just because she hates Muslims. Which couldn't be further from the truth, because she's a non-interventionist who just doesn't want to go to war.
I mean, listen, take this with a grain of salt, but think about, even just in this conversation that we've had over the last 45 minutes, about the pros and cons of all of the other Democratic people that we've talked about. I mean, we said Kirsten Gillibrand, she's some boring Hillary Clinton 2.0 that, supported gun rights. And then we talked about, Elizabeth Warren, whose biggest gaffe was that she said she was a Native American once. And now we come to Tulsi Gabbard, and the smear that's coming against her, whether it's true or not, has more weight to it than some of the smears against the other people. Like, think about just even our conversation about how we were smearing some of the other Democratic candidates. I think you have to take some of this with a grain of salt, because that could be a legitimate question. You know, I see where you're tying this in. I see, you know, she was in war, you know, she was in Iraq. She's against Arab extremism. She's Hindi, so she's like guilty by association in the what'd you call it, that the riot, the Gujarat riot, right? That, you know, it might be completely wrong, but those smears, those points, in my opinion, hold a hell of a lot more weight than Elizabeth Warren said she was a Native American once.
No, because it's because she takes serious stances on serious issues. So the smears are going to be just as serious. When you take serious stances on very serious issues, because she takes very, very non-establishment takes. She takes very non-establishment positions on foreign policy. Her and Rand Paul are probably the most non-establishment politicians we have right now, as far as foreign policy is concerned. And I mean, I agree with her on pretty much a lot of her foreign policy positions. I completely agree with her. I mean, at the end of the day, she's anti-regime change. Like, that's her foreign policy vision. Like, she doesn't believe in overthrowing dictators. And she believes that when there's U.S. support for rebel groups and there's CIA support for moderate rebel groups,
you forgot your air quotes,
war into other countries using moderate rebels, and we use proxy forces to facilitate regime change, it ends up really bad.
Sure.
It ends up bad for everyone. And that's her foreign policy position. That's how she sees America working. Well, let me rephrase that. That's how she does not want America to work with the rest of the world, being in a constant state of war. And I really agree with it. I think that is a message that could really resonate with a lot of people who are not only on the left, but also on the right, who are not happy with these foreign interventions anymore.
I mean, listen, I came into this with a lukewarm opinion on her, and you're kind of selling me, so don't oversell it.
Dude, let me just peel this back a little bit right now. So if I say you're against the Iraq War, I'm against the Iraq War in 2003. Am I throwing words in your mouth or what?
Nope.
Like, you're pretty much okay, perfect. So if you're against the Iraq War and you start saying, if I start calling you a Saddam apologist, that would be fucking ridiculous. I mean, I guess it's a little different because she met with Assad, but Assad is like not Saddam Hussein whatsoever. Like, completely, they're not the same. And I'm not exonerating everything that Assad's done, but I am saying that Saddam Hussein was a much worse dictator.
It's not even about for me. It's not even about that. Honestly, I didn't fault Tulsi Gabbard for meeting with Assad in the same way that I don't fault President Trump for meeting with Kim Jong-un. I think that we should have open dialogue even with our enemies, because how else do we figure out a way to peace? How else do we figure out a way to stop bloodshed? You can't do that without talking to people. So I'm not against that.
Yeah, I think it's just their smear tactics. I just think that they're smear tactics. The other one that you see is that you mentioned earlier is the anti-gay stuff, which I think is just fucking ridiculous. Like, every single politician on planet Earth was anti-gay marriage in the early 2000s. Try to find one that wasn't.
She's only 37, so you know. I'd agree with you for everyone over 45. That's what I'm gonna say.
Dude, she grew up in a conservative household. It was her
yeah, but I think
on marriage. Obama, Hillary Clinton, like, who cares what age they were? She changed. Her opinion's different now. It's like she's not anti LGBTQR4, whatever it's called now. She's not anti-gay. She's just, when she was younger, she didn't believe in gay marriage. Who gives a shit? Like, who cares? If that bothers you so much and you're a progressive voter, like, oh man, she she wasn't a pro-gay marriage back, when she was younger. I can't vote for her. Like, you're just, I don't know what to tell you. Like, you're lost. Like, she changed her opinion.
Well, yeah, I mean,
She changed her opinion.
case
She
in
believes in
point.
it. Like, every fucking politician in the world changed their opinion on
Best
that.
case in point for that would be Barack Obama evolving on the issue. So there's that.
Yeah, that's the terminology. I since evolved on the issue.
I'm with you. I don't think that's where I get stuck on it. Where I get stuck on it is she genuine in that opinion, or is she doing it for just to cover her political tracks? That's where I take pause on it. I'm obviously pro gay marriage. I have been my entire life. I've married a gay couple before, like as a wedding officiant. Like I think it's a fucking stupid thing to be against, in my opinion. But be that as it may, when you're a politician and you hold certain stances, it is fair for you to change those opinions, but it's also fair for me to be skeptical about why you changed those opinions. And it's up to the politician to convince me that their new position is one that was made in truth and in honesty and for good reason and not for political gain.
Yeah, but who cares at the end of the day? It's federal law. It's federal law. Like,
for how
I know
long?
A lot of people who don't believe in gay marriage.
You can repeal federal law. Like, you can change that. So that's why it's important.
It's not every American I think it's like 60-70% of the Americans now believe in gay marriage, or they don't care about it, or apathetic towards it. At least, like, I don't think that policy is changing anytime soon. Like, I don't think that she's going to go in there and start taking.
Hey man, it's still fresh. It's still fresh. I mean, like, think about when women got the ability to vote, right? And a couple years out, a lot of people were supporting it, things like that. It didn't make them any less worrisome that could be repealed. In the same when a disenfranchised group finally comes to the table with the same set of rights and abilities, they hold those rights and abilities very preciously. It's very important to them that stays the way. And we literally, it's law, and 60% of the country believes in it or is apathetic towards it. But it's important for that group, and it's important for a lot of people that aren't in that group. I'm straight, and I still think it's important to me. Like, it's.
Well, she changed her opinion on it.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not upset that
I'm
not upset that she changed her opinion. I think it's still fair for me to be skeptical about why she changed her opinion. That's all I'm saying.
Well,
because it's important. Because if she can change her
be skeptical of every political.
I am. I frankly am.
Politician's opinion. You should be skeptical.
I am. I'm very skeptical about a lot of people's opinions. A lot of politicians' opinions. I think it's healthy to be skeptical about a politician's opinions, because 9 times out of 10, they're not gonna vote that way. They're not gonna act that way. It's just the unfortunate truth of U.S. politics. They do whatever suits them.
I think she said that she personally doesn't believe in gay marriage, but she thinks. I think she said that recently. I might be completely wrong about this, but I thought I saw she read that because of her religion, she didn't personally believe in gay marriage, but like she's fine with it. Like, she doesn't believe government regulation should be involved at all.
That should be a fair point to make.
But I'm not even sure if she said that or not. That might have been her position previously. I'll have to look that up. But I don't know. I think this will be a very interesting candidate. I think something that'd be really positive about her is that she'll really open up interesting debate about U.S. foreign policy. I think that she'll really, really open up a very interesting debate if she goes far into this election. I would love to see her. Debate. I think Elizabeth Warren is kind of on board with Tulsi Gabbard's foreign policy, and I honestly think that they as of right now, they're probably the 2 strongest candidates. That could change completely. I don't really have predictive capabilities. Nor does anyone else.
You gotta get those time crystals, man, and go into the future.
Dude, no one really has predictive capability when choosing presidents nowadays, because I think these smears are actually helping Tulsi Gabbard at the end.
But yeah, it's up to her to respond to them, and if she does a good job responding to them, I think they're bonus points.
It's press, it's free press, and like look what Trump did.
He wrote the playbook on that.
Trump's PR campaign was smears. If you really want to stifle somebody who's running for president, you got to do what they did to Ron Paul.
Just stop talking about them. Yeah.
Ignore him. Just ignored him. They just ignored Ron Paul. They pretended like he did not exist at all, which is like, if that's what you do when you're trying to prevent them from taking any type of political position, just don't talk about them. Just don't
to
say their
that
name.
point, I think it would be, I'm excited for Tulsi Gabbard, and you're kind of selling me on her, because I agree. I would love to see more comprehensive foreign policy debate among Democrats, because I think one of the big smears against Democrats as a whole is that they're weak on foreign policy. And I'd really like to see really strong conversation come out of that, in the same way that I lament Bernie Sanders not taking the nomination. But one thing that he did that was really, really positive was open up debate towards domestic policy, like open up really comprehensive, strong debate towards domestic policy. And maybe Tulsi Gabbard can be that same person, win or lose, for U.S. foreign policy. And that could be a really positive thing, win or lose.
Yeah, I think the debates alone would be very positive. So I'm hoping. I'm not even saying I'm voting for her yet. Like I'm not like, with this all being said, like I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a progressive. I'm not a liberal. I'm not like sitting down here and telling people to vote for any of these candidates whatsoever. I'm just trying to look at it and examine it and try to think of how a progressive would think if I wanted to win an election. I'm not necessarily endorsing any of these candidates. However, if I was going to endorse one of these candidates, it would definitely be Tulsi Gabbard. And I don't know, maybe we'll see what happens. If John Bolton's still president, still not president. If John Bolton is still
God help us all.
in Trump's cabinet, like that, will,
God help us all.
I might be very, very keen on, if something happens in Venezuela that I disagree, there's a lot of time for something for me to just be pissed
2 years
off
is a
about
very long time in American politics.
And swing. I mean, it's possible. I'm not sold. Like, it's Tulsi Gabbard could earn my vote. If she again, if she does something ridiculous, then that would kill it for me. So I wanted to talk about, before we wrap things up, I know we're going long, but I don't know. I figured these longer episodes, I think I've been doing pretty well, and we've been mixing them up on YouTube, so we can actually like put out different pieces of it, and it's been helping the YouTube channel grow. We're at 70 now from 59 to the last podcast. Everyone, holy shit, right? We're right behind Jake Paul. So I was reading voting records today, and I was going through Tulsi Gabbard's voting record and Kirsten Gillibrand's voting records, and Gillibrand, whatever, Danny. So sorry. Kirsten Gillibrand. And I just wanted to say something about somebody. I know you're going to disagree with me so much.
I'm excited.
You're going to be very much opposed to what I say right now, but I have to say it because it will make pretty good YouTube content, and I'm going to mash this thing up. Bernie Sanders, I know a lot of people on the progressive left, they look at Bernie Sanders as a anti-war candidate. The guy's not anti-war at all. When you look at his voting record, this guy has been very close to the policies of Hillary Clinton. He was in favor of the authorization of U.S. forces in Somalia. He supported regime change in Iraq when Bill Clinton was president. The one major vote that he has on his belt is that he did not support the Iraq war, which I give him credit for. I mean, if he did that, then that would just make him just as bad as everyone else. So he does have that. But just looking through his voting record, I think a lot of progressives generally believe that since he's just a progressive, that he is anti-war. It's not. He supported the funding of all the major wars. So he supported funding for Iraq, Afghanistan. So it's like when you support the funding of the war after you vote against it, you might as well have just voted for the war if you're voting to finance the war. And another thing that really sticks out at me, and I'm talking about like every intervention. Like, so he didn't support intervention in Syria, but he supported intervention in the Ukraine and Libya. he supported intervention in Libya, Ukraine, Kosovo, and to finance all the other interventions. And he also was in support of $1.5 trillion to Lockheed Martin for the F-35. And the reason why he supported it was
jobs.
Jobs. The F-35 brings jobs to my state. So I was watching this YouTube video, and he was like, it was really, really funny. He was being criticized about supporting the F-35 project. He was supporting the F-35 project, and this guy gets up and he's like, why are you so pro F-35? I thought you didn't want to support like the military industrial complex and all this stuff. Like, why do you? He's like, first of all, I am not pro F-35. I don't like the F-35. I am not pro F-35. But the F-35 is going to go somewhere, so it might as well be in Vermont. Like, so he's like, because the F-35 will be somewhere, it should go in Vermont. And the guy's like, well, the F-35, he starts shitting on the F-35, and he's like, well, the F-35 is the most state-of-the-art plane. And then the guy's like, no, it's not. So it's this really weird debate between Bernie Sanders, and I'm not sure who he was debating with. It was somebody from the crowd. And they were debating about the F-35. And Bernie Sanders starts changing his opinion basically while he's in this debate. He's like, well, the F-35 is, according to the State Department, it is the best plane in the world. So, F-35, and I noticed that he was just completely changing his position about the military-industrial complex, which he claims not to support. Looking at his voting record, he does. And I wanted to make that distinction. And Danny, I'll let you.
I've been waiting patiently.
Throw me some feedback after this, but I want to make the distinction when you are looking at a politician, or if you're looking for someone to vote, or if you want to support someone or not, don't base it off their rhetoric. If they're in office, if they're in politics, if they are a senator, if they're a congressperson, then you should base it off their voting record. And you can go to their voting record. You can just type in their voting record with senator in Google, and you'll be able to find their voting record, and then you'll be able to filter it out, defense or foreign affairs, and you'll be able to see exactly what they voted for. So if you are anti-war or if you don't favor military intervention, you should always look at what they voted for, because typically, if they voted for one intervention, it's more likely they're going to vote for another one. The only politicians that really have like a squeaky clean voting record is Ron Paul. Like, Ron Paul has a very, and when it comes to foreign intervention, he has a very squeaky voting record. Bernie Sanders doesn't. So I just wanted to make that distinction. That's something I saw while I was looking at it. I know his rhetoric is anti-war, but I don't believe that his actual, based off his voting record, I don't think he is. Now, Danny, I'll let you. All
right, so we'll jump into the F-35 first, because I'm the expert on that, and I'm also the expert on Bernie Sanders. So, F-35. As I mentioned in the episode on F-35, for those of you who hadn't watched it, I'll give you a quick one here. One of the fun facts was one of the ways that Lockheed Martin manufactured the F-35 in both, an actual manufacturing standpoint, but also in a political standpoint, was that they spread their manufacturing across 47 states and 9 different countries. And the reason why they did this is so that they can make it basically failure proof. It wasn't better to manufacture it that way. It wasn't more efficient. It wasn't a technology thing. It wasn't a supply chain thing. It was literally a political thing. They put manufacturing in 47 of our states. So to fault Bernie on voting for the F-35 when it was in his state, we'd have to fault literally every.
It was for basing the planes. It was basing I think 19 planes. So it was just like the maintenance of basing the planes.
and that's part of the package. That's part of the package. Some states were making fuselages. Some states were fucking making tires. They split up the manufacturing, the housing, the maintenance, everything across 47 different states. For us to fault Bernie on this one would be to fault literally almost every single representative of every single state, except for 3. I don't even know which 3 they are. We should probably look this up at some point. So I don't like that. I don't like that call against Bernie. I see that as a very tough thing to call against him. I didn't watch this. I didn't see what you saw, that debate. I'm sure he blundered on it because it's a fucking hard thing to blunder against, because he was domestically in support of creating jobs for Americans, and that was his platform, and that went along with his platform, just plain and simple, you know. Now, as far as some of the other things that he's not anti-war, so he has been and still is today. I think the most recent thing he did was in November. He was on CBS's Face the Nation in an interview there, and he's been loud and outspoken about cutting off foreign aid and military aid to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates because of the war in Yemen. He's been very vocal about this from the start. He's been against this, and we've been talking about it for a while. We know how atrocious it is. He's on our side on that one. In 1990, when George Bush Sr. was around, he tried to stop Bush from driving Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait, and he was in favor of using economic sanctions, and he thought that was the way to drive Saddam out of Kuwait, not military intervention. And he was one of the few people who voted against that, actually. And that shows up in his book as well. Let's see. He's been a big vocal supporter against the Iraq War. He voted against that.
He voted to finance the wars, though.
Okay, so that's different. Voting against the war and voting to finance it are two different things. We were already in the war. What is it supposed to say? Fuck you guys. I'm not going to give the troops money to do their jobs.
Politically, it's very hard. I know that.
It's not political. It's like it's inhumane almost. They're already there, and he's been trying to rein in the ability of presidents to make war, because it's supposed to be an act of Congress. Making war is supposed to be Congress's deal, not the president's. And he's been introducing legislation and vocally supporting legislation that would curtail presidential ability to just willy-nilly just start wars. And he has been his entire tenure. So to say that he's not anti-war is a little, I think it's not correct.
So I wouldn't say he's anti-war. He's probably more anti-war than most elected officials, but I wouldn't label him as anti-war. I would label him. I think he's been involved in enough foreign intervention where I don't think you give that title.
I think he's pragmatic on war.
And I will say he likes. I feel like he is against like full. There's either two things, and I'll give him the benefit of the doubt on this. But I know that a lot of people probably will disagree. Like, they'll disagree with me giving him the benefit of the doubt. A lot of people think that he only opposes foreign intervention when there's Republicans in office. So he's only anti-war as long as there's an R. My argument to defend him would say, well, he's an independent. He's not a democratic established guy.
That's true.
So I would say that.
That is true.
I understand why they would say that, but I would also defend him in that case, saying like, no, I don't think it's political. I mean, yes, he supported intervention he supported the intervention when Clinton was president, not a military intervention, but an intervention to like overthrow the government from it within in 98. He's like fine with those type of interventions. Like, okay, we can send a proxy war. We can send a proxy force into your country. And
Bernie style is more about setting up sanctions than it is about putting boots on the ground.
I think sanctions are way worse though. A lot of the times, like sanctions, what they do is that they make economic and living conditions so bad for the people that in theory, they're supposed to make the living conditions so bad that the people will overthrow the government.
Or more reasonably speaking, that the government decides, hey, this is a bad idea.
a lot of times what happens is that the people just die. Like a lot of those in sanctions, a lot of the people who are affected are the poorest people because they can't get basic food in, they can't get basic medicines in. They, in Iraq, the sanctions in Iraq were the worst sanctions ever imposed on another country in human history.
I mean, and
the ones in the
to your point earlier in the podcast, the effects of war is that innocent civilians die immediately. So whether they're dying from actions on our part or whether they're dying from as an indirect result of economic sanctions, it's like choosing the lesser of the two evils. And I think Bernie falls on the side of the economic ones.
Yeah, but sanctions a lot of times are a pretext to war. I mean, not a pretext, but a
precursor,
intro into war. Like precursor, better word. A lot of times sanctions are put on a country before we invade them. It's like a sign that we're going to invade them. It's a sign that they're like.
It's a warning shot. It's a warning shot, and I think that's totally fair. It's a warning shot. Why would we continue to do business with people who are humanitarian rights violators? Why would we continue to do
a lot of times though? What happens with sanctions is that in Iraq's case, that caused a lot of anti-American sentiment in the Middle East when we put sanctions on Iraq.
Invaded Kuwait, and he was in favor of using economic sanctions to drive him out, not to send jets and shit over there, which is what we ended up doing.
Well, he invaded Kuwait over war. Well, here's what happened. So after the Iranian-Iraq war, whatever country you want to put first, Saddam Hussein was trying that both countries were destroyed. It was like World War I. It's like the war that we never talk about. That was just like on a just such a massive bloody scale. It was Iraq invades Iran. Iran pushes back. There's a stalemate for 8 years, and they're using chemical warfare. It's just disgusting. It's a very horrible, disgusting war. And both countries, their economies are shattered after the war. So what Saddam Hussein does is that there's an agreement in OPEC where all the countries are not going to produce as much oil as they normally do to keep the price of oil high. That way that
they could survive off their
Iraq can survive off their oil revenue. Kuwait started producing more oil. They didn't go with the OPEC.
Well, that's their prerogative, isn't it? As a sovereign nation.
I mean, they can do what they want, but so what happened was that Saddam Hussein was like, "What the fuck? Like, you better stop doing it. You better stop producing as much oil. Like, we made an agreement that we were going to try to rebuild our economies and like we're going to keep the price of oil up." Kuwait said, "Fuck you." And this is just like kind of in a nutshell. Iraq asks Bush, it's like, "Hey man, like, look what's going on right here. We need to rebuild our economies. Like, there's oil fields that are in dispute, like they're on the border and all this stuff. And like, this is bullshit." And they're like, George Bush says, "We're not concerned with we're not concerned with the affairs in the Arab world," or something like that. He says, "We're not concerned. Like, do whatever you want." And that happened. And it was the emir. It was the emir of Kuwait. So it wasn't like it was like some democracy or anything. It was like king who ruled this country. So they invaded, and then we spoke about this one day. Remember Margaret Thatcher situation? Yeah. Margaret Thatcher, the British had interest in Kuwait, and there was like this. She got pissed off, and she met up with George Bush Sr. in Aspen, and they disappeared for 2 days. No one knows where they went.
What they talked about.
I like to think they had sex. And then George Bush comes out and he's like, "He's Hitler! He's Hitler! He's Hitler!"
I mean, he went in not like staunchly against the war, so something definitely happened in those 2 days.
Saddam Hussein. I don't know what they said. No one knows what they said, really. No one knows what that conversation was about. But I mean, I'm pretty sure that she said something to change his mind. Obviously, I mean, I think a lot of it was just because people wanted to get back. They wanted to kick Vietnam syndrome. You know what I mean?
They wanted to win again.
They wanted to show that they wanted to win again. But I mean, Saddam Hussein was a brutal, bad, grotesque
Yes.
dictator. By all accounts, like he was very bad. He massacred a lot of people. He was very, very his son. Remember his son? Both of his sons were bad, but it was Uday. I think it was Uday was like the very, very bad one. Like he used to have his he used to have like rape rooms everywhere, and like he used to rape men and have animals rape people, and like just sick torture. Like he was Joffrey from Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Or no, he was more like Ramsay
yeah.
from Game of Thrones. I lost track of what I was saying, but yeah, it was more complicated than Saddam just decided to invade Kuwait. Like it was a whole thing over war debts and OPEC prices and things and things
in
of
any
that nature,
in any
like
case
economic
in any
reasons.
case, bringing it back to Bernie, he campaigned against going to war there, and he was in favor of using an economic route rather than a military route. And your point was that he's not anti-war. You might not be able to give him an anti-war label based on some of his voting, especially voting to fund existing wars. However, to say that he is pro-war, I think is a stretch. I would put him in somewhere in the middle.
I wouldn't say he's pro-war. I just don't think he's anti-war. I think he doesn't really care about foreign policy.
Yeah, he's mostly focused on domestic policy, and I think that should jive well with a lot of like libertarians. Honestly, like it should jive well with the center because he's trying to fix the U.S.
Libertarians,
yeah, dude. Why not?
Libertarians are not. They don't like Bernie Sanders' economic policies.
They also don't like foreign intervention.
But then they'll just vote for Tulsi, like they'll want Tulsi Gabbard, or they'll just choose Trump because Trump is more anti-war than Bernie Sanders.
No, he's not.
He definitely is.
He hasn't proven himself to be so.
Yes, he has.
Bernie Sanders has voted against wars.
Withdrawing troops from Syria.
But Bernie Sanders has voted against wars for
Yeah,
years.
Trump doesn't have a track record of. He doesn't have a track
record
of voting against wars because he came from the business world. He came from the private sector.
Right.
However, like he is created relationships with North Korea. He's moving soldiers out of Syria. He's getting the ball rolling with removing soldiers from Afghanistan.
And we might be putting some
not 100%.
We might be putting some soldiers in Venezuela soon. Like that remains to be seen.
If that happens, hey, listen, then I will be the first one to jump down his throat. I have not been a fan of Trump over the rhetoric coming from the White House over Venezuela, despite not agreeing with socialism. I don't agree with overthrowing their government. I don't think that makes sense.
So that remains to be seen on Trump. But at least Bernie Sanders has a record, and I think that record is.
But he also has a record. But he has a record of like it's not like he has a straight A record. He has a record of like B's and C. Like he has a mixed match. He has a record of doing, in my opinion. I don't know if you're into like that kind of stuff, or you don't think those things are bad, then maybe you'll think his foreign policy is not that bad, but I don't think he has a great track record. I think he has a pretty status quo track record. He has the Iraq War. He didn't vote on the Iraq War. Like, yeah, I'll give him credit on that.
And that's the de facto biggest, foreign policy blunder that we've had in the last 20 years. So that's a big one. He did right by the big one.
Well, we will see. What do you think? I wonder if Bernie Sanders will be picked as
like a VP,
as a vice. He's so old. He's 77 years old, man.
Don't be ageist. You take Ron Paul. You would take Ron Paul in a heartbeat. He's the same age, so he's older, if anything.
Ron Paul's older than him. Ron Paul's 84.
If he was running right now, you would vote for him. So it's not about age.
Ron Paul's doing well as an 86-year-old, but I think that I love Ron Paul, and I think that it would be hard for him. He's still really sharp with his he still has a show that's
the Liberty
daily.
Report.
The Liberty Report.
With Ron Paul.
The show's still on daily, and
he keeps busy.
he does a lot of work, and he still writes.
Yeah, I
And he
like him.
still makes speeches.
Yeah, I like him.
Like he's still it's very active. But he'll be. Let's just say he won 2 terms. He would be in his 90s when his second term was over, which is like.
But you would vote
I don't.
for him.
There's never been a president
But you
over
would
90.
vote for him.
Yeah, I would vote for him because he would be. I think he would stand by his word and do what he says he would run on.
And I feel the same way about Bernie.
He has a great Senate record. He has a great Senate record. But he's getting up there. He's getting old. Mike Lee is pretty good too on this stuff, and then Rand Paul's son is good too. Rand Paul doesn't have like a squeaky clean record, but it's like better than everyone else's when it comes to foreign intervention. The one thing that Rand Paul did that was, well, this is not his fault. He supported the initial. He supported deployment in Afghanistan, but I mean, I'll forgive him for that. I'll forgive Rand Paul for that. Everything else he's been pretty good at. He's gotten better over the years. All right. Any closing words? We're going on for an hour and a half right now.
My closing words are, I am very excited for the next 12 debates that'll be coming out. 6 this year, 6 next year. It's going to be exciting. We'll definitely cover it. And we'll see what happens.
We will be covering it. I'm excited. I'm excited to cover the presidential election, the American presidential election. We might be covering some Israel. Well, I think I'm going to go more into the Israeli election as well. So
cool.
If you guys are interested, that we'll be doing that. We already did some stuff on Benjamin Netanyahu and the Likud party. Likud. It's a really cool episode if you guys want to check it out. We did an episode. I spoke to Ted Snyder at antiwar.com. Check that episode out about Netanyahu's fiasco he's in right now. And yeah, let's let everyone go. All right, guys. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed to the channel already. Thank you all for listening to another episode of Bro History. Thank you for the reviews. Look forward for more. And I like you all more than friends. I stole that from Gavin McInnes, so I can't. If I didn't say I stole that, then I would feel guilty.
All right.